her husband's death. There are at least 2 witnesses that will be taking the stand this morning who are in a position to make statements of that nature. You asked that we let you know ahead of time, and so I'm doing that. One of them is Detective Snowden, who would be the state's first witness.
Okay, when we get to that point, if you'll let me know, I'll send the jury out. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. We thank you for coming back and being with us today. Will there be any further evidence on behalf of the state of North Carolina?
Your Honor, there will be. The state calls Detective Snowden from the Raleigh Police Department.
Place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give forth should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Come around and have a seat, please.
Witness, please.
Would you state your full name for the court, please?
Detective Snowden of the Raleigh Police Department.
And Detective Snowden, how long have you been with RPD?
I've been employed with the Raleigh Police Department for over 16 years.
And what kind of education or training did you have in order to become a Raleigh police officer?
I spent 6 months in the Raleigh Police Academy, and then once I graduated from the Raleigh Police Academy, I did 20 weeks with a field training officer until I was ready to be on my own.
Variety of duties that you've had while with the Raleigh Police Department.
I was in field operations, a patrol officer, till May of 2007, and then I was promoted to detective in May of 2007. I was general investigations, burglary unit, robbery unit, aggravated assault unit, and I'm currently assigned to the homicide unit.
How long have you been with homicide?
It'll be 2 years in February.
Now, prior to being on the homicide unit, had you been involved in homicide investigations?
Yes, yes.
And can you estimate for the jury approximately how many homicide investigations you've been involved in?
When I was in patrol, I probably responded to approximately 15 to 20 of them as a patrol officer, and since I made detective, I've probably been involved in maybe 30 to 40 homicide investigations.
And as a Raleigh officer, have you been involved in the past in either giving death notifications to the families of people who have been killed or present when that's happened?
Yes, yes.
About how many times have you been involved in that side of being a police officer?
Since joining the homicide unit, one of our duties is also to just work general death investigations. You know, for instance, a person might become deceased by natural causes in their apartment, or might find somebody in the woods or something like that. So it could easily be 100 to 150 times.
And you have seen people react in different ways.
I have.
Now, were you working on Sunday, June 16th of 2013?
I was working weekend duty. At that time, I was assigned to the aggravated assault unit, and I was contacted by Sergeant Taylor with the homicide unit. She said that Wake Sheriff's Office had a homicide that they were working, and she had requested that I check in with those detectives at Wakefield High School and assist them. And at that point also they were trying to determine exactly where the homicide may have occurred. She asked me to go to Wakefield and speak with the investigators, so I did, and two of our detectives went out there as well. I guess I kind of became the de facto lead detective with our Raleigh PD because I was on the aggravated assault unit and the other two were on lower units. And when I arrived, I met with Chief Johnson, Investigator Gay, and Investigator Weaver with the Wake County Sheriff's Office, among other personnel.
Do you know about what time it was you were contacted to meet them at Wakefield High School?
I don't know the exact time, but it was probably around 7:30 p.m.
And you said that you got there and you in fact met with a number of people from the sheriff's office. Is that correct?
I did.
One of the things you mentioned was that they were not sure at that time where the actual killing had taken place. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did they explain to you the two places that they suspected might be, either one of which might be the place where the deceased had been killed?
Well, I was told that they had identified the deceased through fingerprints, and they had contacted us. And at that time, there was no missing persons report concerning the deceased from either their agency or Raleigh Police Department. I was told that there were two possible addresses for the deceased, and that one had already been checked, so they were going to go to the second address, and they felt like that would probably be his best address, and that was at 12412 Schoolhouse Street up in Wakefield.
So is that address in the city of Raleigh?
Yes, it's in the city of Raleigh, up in the northeast part of the city, next to Wake Forest.
And did they say anything to you about where the body of Mr. Perez had actually been found?
I was told that he'd been located off of Highway 98.
And the place where the body was found was in the county, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the Schoolhouse Road address was in the city?
Correct.
So is that the reason that the Sheriff's Department contacted the police department?
Well, there was actually probably two reasons: assistance with death notification, and they also wanted to just check the residence, make sure that no foul play had occurred there.
So after you were given that information by the sheriff's deputies about the Raleigh address and the county location of where the body was found, what did you do?
After we received all that information, it was determined that Investigator Gay, Investigator Weaver, and myself and Detective Maddox with the Raleigh Police Department would all go to that Schoolhouse Street location and attempt to locate Mr. Perez's next of kin, wife, children, whatever, and just basically do the death notification and see if we could kind of look around the residence, maybe make sure everything seemed squared away there.
At about what time did you arrive at the residence with the other investigators?
We followed each other in. It was approximately 8 p.m. that day.
And when you got there, was there anyone at the house?
We first came in contact with Michelle Lopez. Miss Lopez is the daughter of the defendant. She answered the door and she allowed us into the house. I kind of stood there while Investigator Weaver asked some general questions. We verified, or we found out that Mr. Perez was Michelle Lopez's stepfather, and that he was married to the defendant, Miss Madonna. We found out
Was the defendant there?
she wasn't there at that time, no.
And was some effort made, a death notification was not given to the daughter, was it?
No, Investigator Weaver decided, and well, we all decided it was best to give it directly to his wife.
And was there was contact made somehow with the defendant to have her return to the house?
Yes, Michelle Lopez was able to call her mother, and she informed her that the police were at the house, and I could hear basically her ask why we were there, and the daughter said she didn't know, just to come home.
Now, at some point, did the defendant arrive back at the home?
Yes, she pulled up to the residence around 8:25 p.m., approximately 8:25 p.m.
And she was not immediately told that her husband was deceased, was she?
No, she wasn't.
What was the initial conversation between the defendant and Detective Weaver that occurred in front of you?
Overall.
Myself and Investigator Gay were outside the residence, and as Miss Madonna pulled up, she pulled up in a white Mercedes. We were basically in the street at the curb, almost simultaneously as Investigator Gay and I started to approach Miss Madonna. Investigator Weaver and Detective Maddox walked out of the residence, and Investigator Weaver was kind of like, she was on point basically, and wanted to get to Miss Madonna first before she could say anything. Miss Madonna informed us that she'd already contacted her attorney.
Did that
and nothing had been said yet.
Did that raise a flag in your mind?
Stan?
What is that a normal reaction that you've had from people who have been asked to come back to their house because there are police there?
No, it is not.
So after she said that, was she asked any questions in front of you by Detective Weaver?
Investigator Weaver confirmed that Miss Madonna was married to Mr. Perez, and then she attempted to, then she informed her, tactfully that Mr. Perez was found deceased.
Your Honor, could I be heard?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll excuse you to the jury, and for just a few moments while you're there, do not discuss this case among yourselves, neither should you form or express any opinion about any issue in this trial during this time. That's your excuse to the jury room. Record should reflect jury's absence from the courtroom. You may continue.
Detective Snowden, had anyone, as far as you were aware, told the defendant up until that point that her husband was dead?
Not that I know of.
And what, if anything, did Detective Weaver tell her about that?
Well, Before doing that, she had asked her why she'd made contact with the attorney, and Miss Madonna just said because the police was there. And then she made the notification.
Before doing that, did she ask her where her husband was?
No, I don't think she had asked her that yet. I don't recall that.
How is it that Detective Weaver informed the defendant that her husband was deceased?
She basically explained that the reason we were there is that he had been found deceased. At that point, she was still standing up, and when she told her that, she cupped her hands to her face and fell to the ground and started crying uncontrollably.
And you observed that reaction of the defendant, is that correct?
She was on the ground for a minute or two, a couple minutes, and Detective Weaver knelt down with her, or Investigator Weaver knelt down with her, and was trying to provide kind of a shoulder to cry on. And as I was watching her, I noticed that there were no tears or anything. It kind of caught me. It kind of surprised me a little bit. I remember looking at Investigator Gay. We kind of looked at each other like this didn't feel right at all.
And because of your many experiences in investigations of homicides as well as other deaths where you've been able to see the reactions of family members who've been notified of their deceased loved one, did this defendant's reaction appear to you to be genuine?
No, it did not.
And did you ever see any tears?
I never observed any tears.
And you said that she was on the ground covering her face for about 2 minutes.
Well, she would move her hands sometimes, because Investigator Weaver was trying to talk to her, and I remember she kind of put her hand on her shoulder, and that's when I noticed she didn't have any tears.
And after approximately 2 minutes, did Investigator Weaver and the defendant sit down on the front steps and talk?
Yeah, Investigator Weaver had her sit over on the steps, talking to her, basically trying to get, any information as to where her husband had been.
Was there an immediate change in the defendant's behavior at that point?
Yes, I observed that she was able to, in a really controlled manner, answer questions, and it just seemed like all the emotion from the ground to over there was turned off.
Did she appear at that point to be in full control of herself?
Yes.
And she didn't cry anymore?
No.
And she answered questions calmly?
She did.
And easily?
Yes.
I have no other questions.
You want to ask him any questions or just want to be heard?
If I can ask him a couple of questions, Your Honor. Good morning, Detective.
Morning.
You said you said before that you've given a lot of death notifications, correct?
I've given a lot, and I've been there for a lot.
And been around a lot. Yeah. So either being there, doing them yourself, or just being around the area when it's given to other people, you've been around a lot of death notifications.
Yes.
And people react differently whenever you're telling them that their loved one has died, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And not everyone is going to sit there and sob uncontrollably, and some people are going to be more muted. There are going to be a varying wide range of reactions people have when they get this news from you.
People either sob uncontrollably or they just kind of shut down.
And had you had never talked to Miss Madonna before in your life?
Not that I know of.
Not you're aware of, and you had never you have no knowledge about how she processes grief or anything like that?
No.
And you've never received any kind of expert training or anything, or taken any class to determine if a person is being genuine in their crying?
I've taken many interview classes.
But did any of that go specifically to a person being genuine with their crying?
I can't recall any specific class or anything.
And
All I have is my 16 years of
And,
experience.
and yeah, a lot of this is coming from just your on-the-job training, your on-the-job experience, and just your personal
Yes, sir.
training. And at this point in time, you didn't know that the situation was going to be that Miss Madonna was protecting herself from her husband who had tried to kill her, correct?
At that point in time, I only knew what Wake SO investigators had told me.
But you didn't know that part of it. That part that Miss Madonna would later state that her husband had tried to kill her.
I didn't know that until later on in that evening.
Okay. And the fact that she had gone through that may also impact how she reacts to a death notification, correct?
I wouldn't say that.
What would you say to that then?
I would say when I saw how she reacted, it all of a sudden I realized that I need to really be on my A game because this might be a Raleigh investigation. That's how my gut checked.
But it ended up not being because you didn't see anything that led the investigation did not show that it happened inside the Raleigh jurisdiction, correct?
Up to that night when I cleared, no, it didn't.
No further question, Your Honor.
Yes?
Excuse me. Your Honor, I think that this is all speculation at this point. He has never had any interaction with
Which
Madonna.
part are you objecting to?
Well, I'm objecting specifically to the crying being genuine.
Well, I think his answer was the defendant's reaction did not appear to me to be genuine. Is that what you're objecting?
Yes, Your Honor.
Anything else?
I don't believe so, Your Honor. That was.
You want to be heard on that?
No, Your Honor.
Stay. Bring you in.
Snowden, after Detective Weaver informed the defendant that her husband had been found deceased, what did the defendant appear to do?
After she informed her that her husband had been deceased, she cupped her hands to her face and fell to the ground and started crying uncontrollably.
Would she make any kind of eye contact with you or Detective Weaver?
She made contact with Detective Weaver. Detective Weaver knelt down next to her and tried to console her.
You were real close to her as well, is that correct?
Yeah, about maybe 3 feet away.
And what, you said she covered her face?
She did, but while Detective Weaver was talking to her, she moved her hands.
And when she moved her hands, could you see her face?
I could.
What did you see?
She appeared to be acting like she was crying, but I didn't see.
Objection, Your Honor.
Go on.
But I didn't see any tears.
And how long was she down on the grass appearing to cry?
A couple minutes, 2 to 3 minutes.
And after that amount of time, did Detective Weaver and the defendant get up and sit on the front steps of the residence?
Yes, Detective Weaver had her stand up and moved her over to the steps so she could try to ask some follow-up questions.
And at that point, did the defendant's behavior and demeanor change remarkably?
Yes, once Detective Weaver started asking her some questions, she immediately calmed down and was very controlled.
Any tears while she was sitting on the steps?
I didn't see any.
So you never saw any tears?
I never saw one tear.
Detective Weaver continued to ask her some questions, is that correct?
She did.
And what did the defendant tell Detective Weaver about Mr. Perez?
Objection to the hearsay, Your Honor.
Overruled.
She tried to get some basic background as far as when he had left the residence. She asked about the marriage. Miss Madonna had said that there were some issues in the marriage. Mr. Perez, apparently he drank, and there were some issues with money. And there was also, she'd found out there had been some infidelity. She admitted all that to Detective Weaver.
That's what she told Detective Weaver.
Mm-hmm.
Did she ever ask Detective Weaver or anybody else there how her husband had died
She did not.
or where he died?
No.
When did she say anything about having gone to South Carolina to visit an ill relative?
Yes, she said she'd been in South Carolina the day before on the 15th of June. She'd went down there to see a relative, and she had returned home late that night on the 15th.
And what did she say about the state that Mr. Perez was in at that time?
She said when she'd got home, he was drunk. He'd been drinking, and that they had, I guess they had a conversation or talked, and she had told him to leave.
And what did she say he did?
She said around 7 p.m. On the 15th, he had left the residence with the suitcase and his cell phone.
And where was he supposedly going, according to the defendant?
She thought he was at his, might have went with his sponsor that night, but I think she later indicated she thought he was in Florida.
Did you ever ask Ms. Madonna any questions about whether other people were in the house when she said the Mr. Perez had left?
I did. What had kind of come to my mind was just to see if anybody else was in the residence when he had left, or if anybody had seen him leaving, and she said she was alone in the residence. I asked also, what he was driving, and she says he'd left on foot. He wasn't driving. He walked through the neighborhood.
And she said he had a suitcase with him?
Yes.
At some point, did Detective Weaver, in your presence, inform Ms. Madonna that her husband's death appeared suspicious?
Yes, after speaking with her, she did inform her that, his death was suspicious and he might have been killed, murdered. And she basically just said, hey, is it okay if we look around your residence, make sure, that there's nothing here so we can kind of check this off and move on in the investigation.
Did Ms. Madonna give permission to look in the house?
She told us she'd already talked to her attorney and we needed a search warrant.
Up until this point, had Detective Weaver given the defendant any details about how her husband had died?
No.
You mentioned earlier that you when the initial death notification was given by Detective Weaver to the defendant, did you think there was something odd or unusual or disturbing about
Objection, Your Honor.
the defendant's reaction?
It's done.
Did you have conversation with Detective Weaver, Detective Gay, or any of the other detectives on scene about needing to look further into the defendant?
Yes, after she said we needed a search warrant, I spoke with Investigator Gay real quickly, and I think we all agreed that one needed to be done. We needed to make sure the house was not a crime scene at that point. It was the last place that Mr. Perez was known to be. She had already admitted to us that there were issues in the marriage, and just her demeanor as well had bothered me.
And was, in fact, a search warrant obtained to search the house by the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, one was.
While you were there before the search warrant arrived, did you discover that there were other people in the house?
Well, when we had initially entered the house earlier, I was told that there was a younger child in the house, and I remember seeing a babysitter. She left. She left prior to Miss Madonna arriving at the house. The babysitter did, and we later found out there was a grandparent in the house. So when we got there, there was a total of 3 people in the residence.
And did another daughter of the defendant arrive while you were there?
Yes. While Wake SO was applying for their search warrant, I had one of our detectives stand with the family on the back porch because we'd secured the residence, and I had another detective with me up front, and Chief Johnson was still there. I guess another daughter named Rachel had walked up as it was getting dark. As a matter of fact, it was almost dark, and she walked up and asked what was going on. She seemed real nervous and upset.
And what, if anything, did Rachel Lopez say in your presence?
She said, well, I sat her down on the steps. I didn't want to allow her to go into the residence, and I got Chief Johnson to speak with her. And initially, she seemed real upset, but he was able to talk with her and ask what was wrong. She said that her mother had actually gotten home the day before around 8 or 9 o'clock p.m. That was kind of that was another issue with me, because Miss Madonna had said she had gotten home well before 7 because Mr. Perez had left the house at 7, so I knew she was at home at 7. She then asked her if she'd Chief Johnson had then asked her about her stepdad and if he'd been around, and she said that her mother had told her that she was going to ask Mr. Perez to leave that night, and she remembered hearing some arguing, and then she thought that they had left together. I remember asking, or I remember Chief Johnson asking if what they had left in, and she said she didn't know what they had driven away in. She just heard the garage, one of those automatic garage doors or something, open and close. She then said about approximately 20 minutes or a little more later that her mom came home and her mother was was sweaty and kind of upset too. Her mother had told her that her and Mr. Perez had gotten into some kind of fight, and that Mr. Perez had cut her, and her mom had a cut on her arm. She then said she went to her room and called her preacher or priest.
So after you had heard those statements by Rachel, what was your thought as to the defendant's story that her husband had left on foot with a suitcase the night before to go to his sponsor's house?
I felt like Miss Madonna had lied to us, and there was more going on than she had led us to believe. And at that point, I talked with Chief Johnson and worked out some transportation so Rachel could be taken back to Wake SO station, and I believe they ended up transporting Miss Madonna back to their station as well.
After that, when it was determined that that the house is not the place where Mr. Perez was actually murdered, did you or the Raleigh Police Department have anything more to do with this case?
We helped maintain crime scene security. Wake SO was short on deputies, so I was able to provide 2 of our officers since it was in the city limits. Once the crime scene search warrant was completed, I did stand at the garage and look, and when they opened the garage, there was a green Jeep in the garage.
Did you notice anything on the outside of the Jeep?
I noticed there appeared to be some blood smears on the passenger side of the Jeep, but my main concern, obviously, for my case was there any blood on the floor of the garage, to indicate that maybe something had happened there, and there wasn't.
And that essentially ended Raleigh's involvement in this county murder, is that correct?
Correct.
I have no other questions.
Finished with the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Detective Snowden.
Morning.
I just have a couple of questions for you, sir. Like you guys kind of finished up with Ms. Shandles, I guess explain how the jurisdiction between the Sheriff's Office and the Raleigh Police Department worked in this case.
Well, in this case, basically you have the county, which we're all in, so the sheriff has jurisdiction pretty much everywhere. But for just about 99.9% of all criminal matters, if it's in the city of Raleigh, we take care of it or handle it.
And when people say out in the county, that just means out of any municipality, city limits, is that what that means?
Well, most of the time, yes.
So though for those areas that aren't covered by like Wake Forest or Knightdale or Garner, those surrounding areas that they're not covered by that city police department, then the Wake County Sheriff's Office is, I guess,
Responsible, yeah.
So when you guys were brought in, you were brought in to investigate if anything had occurred in the actual home, which was in Raleigh city limits, correct?
Well, like I said, it was sort of 2 things: to help with the death notification and also to make sure that location, wasn't a crime scene.
Thank you, sir. And when you gave the death notice, I guess, how many officers were there talking to Ms. Madonna?
Only one was talking to her.
Talking to her, and that was Investigator Weaver?
Mm-hmm.
And how many officers were around to listen in on the conversation?
It was myself, Detective Maddox was there, and Detective Gay. There was another detective there, but he wasn't close by.
Okay. And Investigator Weaver was leading the investigation because it started out as a Wake County Sheriff's case, and until you guys got more information, you weren't involved in any kind of questioning or, I guess, thorough investigation of this case, correct?
Correct.
And to Ms. Madonna in front of you, she did let you know that Jose, her husband, had been a former assistant district attorney in Florida.
Miss Madonna, I believe she'd asked her, about maybe his income, and she said she thought that he'd been a former district attorney in Florida.
And she also mentioned through that questioning that over the previous 2 months that Ms. Madonna had asked him to leave, him being Jose, but he had threatened to harm himself, so she had not forced the issue.
Correct.
And from the time that when you said you arrived at the house, there was, I believe, Michelle Lopez was there, and then the younger child was there, and the babysitter was there, but the babysitter wasn't allowed to leave, correct?
Yes, yeah, myself and Investigator Gay spoke to her briefly before she left.
And I guess you guys figured that she didn't know anything, she wasn't relevant to this investigation, so you allowed her to leave the scene.
After gathering her...
After gathering her information, just in case later on she was relevant, you'd be able to contact her.
Correct.
And also, Mr. Madonna, John Madonna, was on the scene as well. An older gentleman. Did you ever have any with him?
I believe I saw him, but I didn't have much contact with him. If there was a grandparent or something.
A grandparent, yes, sir. But Miss Madonna wasn't there. You called Michelle. You had Michelle call her mom and say, the police are here. And you said Miss Madonna asked what were they around for, and she said she didn't know, but
Come home.
You need to come home.
Yeah.
About how long did it take Miss Madonna to get back to the residence at that point?
I believe I noted that that call was made around 8:20 p.m. and Miss Madonna showed up around 8:25. It was a real short time.
Oh, and you had never met Miss Madonna or seen Miss Madonna or talked to Miss Madonna on any occasion before?
Not that I know of.
No further questions, Your Honor.
For the record.
No other questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You can stand down. Any objection to him being released from his subpoena?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your
Objection?
Honor. Thank you, sir.
Now, further evidence stated.
Your Honor, the state would call Sean Scott.
Place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right. You solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. You may have a seat.
Witness, please.
Would you state your full name for the court, please?
Kenneth Scott.
And how are you employed?
I'm a sergeant with the Wake County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with the Sheriff's Department?
Going on 14 years.
And before you were with the sheriff, what did you do?
Military, Division of Prisons.
And what did you do with the Military Division of Prisons?
Well, I was in the military, then I got out and went to the prisons. So,
Okay. So in the military, what did you do?
machinery technician. I was in the Coast Guard.
Slow down and speak up,
Machinery
please.
technician. I was in the Coast Guard.
Okay. And what kind of machinery did you work on?
Air conditioning, small engines, diesel.
And in the Division of Prisons, after you left the Coast Guard, what did you do?
Watched inmates.
So you were a guard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you work in more than one prison facility during that time?
No, ma'am.
And how long were you with the Division of Prisons?
8 months.
So when you were in the Coast Guard, did you have post privileges,
As in,
PX?
yes, ma'am.
What's a PX?
Commissary is what I'm assuming you're talking about. You go in like a grocery store, a store.
So that's for military people and their families?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the advantage of military people and their families shopping at those places?
It was cheaper.
Now, in June of 2013, what were your duties at the sheriff's?
I was an investigator, Special Operations Division, assigned to Technical Surveillance Unit.
What does that mean, that you were assigned to technical surveillance?
We were a support division, support staff that helped all divisions throughout the sheriff's office.
Doing what?
Phone work, trackers, cameras.
And when you say phone work, what are you talking about?
We generally help the investigators with phone orders or phone extractions.
And when you say phone extractions, what are you talking about?
We actually take the phone, the physical phone, and hook it to a machine, and it downloads the information from the phone.
And is there a special name for the machine that you use to take the information off of a phone?
Yes, ma'am. It's called Celebrite.
And does Celebrite work with all different kinds of phones?
It does.
And do you, in order to use the Celebrite, do you have to calibrate it or have it have maintenance done on it on regular intervals?
Yes, ma'am. It's primarily like a little computer, and it lets you know when it needs updates. It's like works off the Windows platform. So it just sends you like an update, and you just basically click and it updates it.
In June of 2013, was your Celebrite equipment working properly?
Yes, ma'am.
It had been updated as much as it could be updated at that point?
Yes, ma'am.
And on the 16th of June 2013, were you notified by investigators from the Sheriff's Department that a man's body had been found on the roadside in northern Wake County?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall who notified you of that?
I believe it came through my lieutenant at the time. I'm not sure who notified him, but we were in a class in Virginia during that time.
And you knew that there was an ongoing investigation of the death of the man who had been found on the side of the road?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point, were you contacted and given some phones by Detective Weaver or Detective Gay to get the information from those phones using your Celebrite equipment?
I was.
And did you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
And at some point, were you also given a telephone to put onto the Celebrite to download information from that belonged to a person named John Chadwick Richardson?
Yes, ma'am.
And at some point, were you also given a Garmin Nuvie by Detective Gay to download the information that was on that GPS unit?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you do that?
I did.
And was that information transferred to disks?
It was.
May I approach?
Yes, ma'am.
I've put in front of you what have been marked as States Exhibits 39, 40, 41, 44, and 45. If you could start with States Exhibit number 39, look at that, tell me if you can identify it, and if so, what it is.
You want me to open it?
Yes.
39 is a Motorola cell phone provided by Verizon.
And what is 40?
.40 is an iPhone and with some data in it, stick.
And what is 41?
It's a Garmin GPS.
And are those two phones, States Exhibits 39 and 40, the two phones that you downloaded on the Celebrite?
Yes, ma'am.
And John Chadwick Richardson's phone, that was not seized, was it?
No, ma'am.
That was returned to Mr. Richardson?
It was. I believe it was downloaded by consent.
And the States Exhibit 41, the Garmin Nuvi, is that the Garmin Nuvi that was handed to you by Detective Gay?
Yes, ma'am.
And looking at States 44 and 45, how do you recognize those if you do?
They're just DVDs, and it looks like it was transferred. The phone extractions were transferred to these discs.
And the GPS as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And you recognize those? They have your initials on them somewhere?
Not only, I think Detective Weaver might have transferred it. Let me see.
You looked at, once you downloaded the phones and the Garmin Nuvi using the Celebrite, you looked at the data that came out of there, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am. I verified that it actually extracted to our computer, and then I'll take it from there and put it on the disk and hand it to the investigators.
And that's what you did with States Exhibits 44 and 45. You gave those discs back to the investigators.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know if these are the exact same ones. I think this is Detective Weaver's handwriting, so I'm not sure if this is the exact same one, but that's what I did.
And you could tell from verifying what came off of those discs that your Celebrite had been working properly.
Yes, ma'am.
And did you alter in any way any of the information that came off of the Android phone that you have in front of you, which is States Exhibit number 39, the iPhone that you have in front of you, States Exhibit 40, or States Exhibit 41, the Garmin Nuvi GPS unit?
No, ma'am.
And did you alter in any way the information that you took off of John Chadwick Richardson's phone when you downloaded that?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer into evidence States Exhibits 39, 40, 41, 44, and 45.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion to introduce into evidence is allowed.
Other than being sort of a support person for downloading information from phones and GPSs, you weren't actually involved in any of the other investigation part of the case involving the death of Jose Perez, were you?
No, ma'am. I believe other than the exigent request for the records on the initial, that is it.
You didn't analyze any data, you just handed it over once it was out of the phones and the GPS?
Yes, ma'am.
I have no other questions.
Witness with the defendant.
Mr. Scott, so basically you just plug these phones in, hit a button that downloads everything, and then you pass it on to the next investigator?
It does, yes, sir.
And the closest PX or any commissary to here is in Fayetteville. Is that still the case?
I'm assuming. I was in Florida, Coast Guard in Florida, so yeah.
Okay. But there's not one closer or anything like that, here in Raleigh at least. There's no military base or anything like that here.
There might be one in Goldsboro. I don't know if
Goldsboro.
it's, yeah, or Fayetteville.
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Rack?
No other questions.
Thank you, sir. You can stand down. Any objection to him being released from his subpoena?
Not from the state.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further evidence, State?
Your Honor, the state would call Investigator Gay.
Swear testimony you give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Let's see, please.
Witness.
Would you state your full name for the court, please?
Brian Gay.
And how are you employed?
I'm currently a sergeant with the Wake County Sheriff's Office
How long have you been with the sheriff's office?
since January 1st, 2004.
And during the course of your employment at the sheriff's office, what have been your duties?
I've been assigned to work in the Judicial Services Division, the Courthouse Operations Division, the Patrol Division, and most of my tenure has been with the Criminal Investigations Division.
What's judicial services?
They are kind of work with courtroom deputies in the process at one time when I served with them. Judicial Services also deals with civil paperwork such as subpoenas, eviction papers, anything that has to be served from a civil court paper on a person, a Judicial Services deputy could be responsible for serving.
And you said that you worked in the courthouse. In what capacity?
I was a courthouse deputy.
Just like the ones that we have here today?
Yes, ma'am.
And on patrol, were you assigned to a particular area of the county for your patrol?
Most of my tenure as a patrol deputy was on the east side of the county, but based on department needs on any given day, we may move to any area of the county based on staffing needs or calls for service in that area of the county on that given day.
And you are currently an investigator. When did you become an investigator?
I became an investigator in July of 2007. I was promoted to sergeant and went back to the patrol division went to Judicial Services in July of 2014.
And that's where you currently are?
Actually, I was moved to the patrol division in December of 2014, where I've been since.
Now, were you working on June 16th, 2013?
I was called in to work on this case.
Were you
Yes.
working at that time?
Yes, I was.
Were you here in town at the time that you got the first call to respond to the scene on Old Bay Leaf Road?
I was not.
Where were you?
I was vacationing with family in the western part of the state near Hickory, North Carolina.
And what did you do when you got the call to come in and respond to the murder scene?
I had received a telephone call from my sergeant, Sergeant Lilliquist, advising me that we had an unidentified male deceased in the northern part of the county, and he requested that I return to assist with the investigation.
Do you recall about what time it was that you got the call from Sergeant Lilliquist?
I believe around sometime 7:20 in the morning.
And did you immediately get back in your car and return to Raleigh?
Yes, ma'am. We packed the family up and came back.
And about what time did you get back?
I believe I got back sometime just before 1 o'clock.
And did you immediately go to the scene on Old Bay Leaf Road?
I did not. I was told to stand by Sergeant Lilliquist because they were in the process of trying to identify the victim, and he would contact me when there was further assignments to be made.
At some point that afternoon on the 16th, was the deceased person on the side of the road identified as Jose Perez?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall at what time that notification came to you?
I received a print notification, which is something that is sent out by CCBI by email. I actually received that before getting a telephone call from Sergeant Lilliquist, but it was approximately 16:55 hours.
What's that in real person time?
That would be 4:55 in the afternoon, sorry.
Now, when you were notified as to the identity of the body that was found on the side of the road, did you at that point try to do some kind of background checking on that person to try to find out a possible address or any other information to be able to go forth with an investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us what you did.
Typically, whenever we have a situation like that involving, and we get a name related to an investigation, depending on the role they may play, we try to immediately start doing background information to find out as much information as we can about a person. They could be looking for addresses, potential addresses, telephone numbers, employment, driving histories, driving records, vehicles, anything that we can discover from just our database searches that we can do in the very beginning of an investigation.
So did you find some possible addresses for the deceased person, Jose Perez?
I did.
And what were the addresses, local addresses that you found for him?
We found an address on Queensland, I believe, Road, and an address on Schoolhouse Street.
And could you tell just from the searches that you did online, which of those places he had been living at?
At that time, no.
So did you do anything to try to discover which address was the correct address?
That information came from tax records as far as the two potential addresses, and one of the first things we did when we were beginning to look for those addresses is go to the Queensland Road address to determine if there was any activity there, and we did not find any activity there.
Was the house empty?
It appeared to be empty, and there was a for sale sign in the front yard.
And so what was the other address that you had found through your searching that was connected in some way to Mr. Perez?
12412 Schoolhouse Street.
And at that point, when you found that address, what was determined needed to be done?
Based on the address being in the city, and at that point in time, I do not know that we knew the exact point of any potential crime scene. So we met with Raleigh police detectives at Wakefield High School in a parking lot there to determine a course of action for going to the address we believed we'd be able to make a death notification.
And did you meet ahead of time with any Raleigh officers and explain to them what you knew at that point?
Yes, we did.
And you met where?
In the parking lot at Wakefield High School, and I believe it was Detective Snowden and Detective Maddox.
And was there anybody else from the Sheriff's Department with
I
you?
believe Sergeant Lilliquist was present, Chief Deputy Richard Johnson, and Investigator Weaver.
And had anybody in particular or any people been in particular assigned as the primary investigators for this case?
Investigator Weaver was assigned as the lead, and I was assigned as the co-lead.
And when did you meet with RPD detectives at Wakefield?
I can give you an exact time. I believe it was around 6:35.
In the evening?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you got there, what happened?
We stood by waiting for some additional information, giving a briefing to the Raleigh detectives that were on scene, and began formulating a plan for going over to make the death notification.
And what was the plan that you had?
We had decided, since the body had been located in the county, that as in Sheriff's Office main jurisdiction, that myself and Investigator Weaver would go to the residence for the death notification, and two Raleigh detectives are going to accompany us for any number of reasons, but also because of jurisdictional reasons.
And tell us about the jurisdictional reasons.
Primarily, the way the law enforcement works in Wake County is there are about 13 municipalities, towns, or cities. The primary jurisdiction of those particular police departments may be to investigate any crimes that happen within their territorial city limits. Anything that happens outside of a territorial city limit is primarily investigated by the Sheriff's Office. We can investigate things in any of the municipalities or towns, but primarily we investigate only those incidents that happen outside the city limits of any given town or city.
Was there some question at that point about where Mr. Perez had been actually murdered?
There was.
And was that one of the reasons that the Sheriff's Department involved the Raleigh Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
Where Mr. Perez's body was found, was that city or county?
That was in the county.
And the address where he had been living, where was that?
That was in the city limits of Raleigh.
Now, was there some plan about when you went to that residence on Schoolhouse Street about who was going to take the lead in talking to and actually giving the death notification?
Yes, there was. Investigator Weaver was going to take that task.
And at that point, did you have any thought that anyone in the family had been involved at all in Mr. Perez's death?
No, ma'am.
What time about was it that you got to the 12412 Schoolhouse Road address?
I believe we arrived there around 8 p.m.
Before you got there, you knew what the place looked like, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe it for us?
It is a brick front house on about a quarter-acre lot in what I would call a standard neighborhood in North Raleigh.
You knew what to expect before you got there, correct?
Yes.
And why is that?
I had, what part of this information that I do on the background in the very beginning, particularly when I go to the tax records websites, is I will look at photographs that are provided on the tax record website to see what a house looks like, so we pull up to the right house and can verify the house for any number of reasons.
May I approach?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm handing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 46. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is it?
This appears to be a photograph taken from the WakeGov website of a tax record photo of the residence.
Is that one of the things that you looked at when you were trying to identify where Mr. Perez lived?
It is.
Your Honor, the state offers into evidence State's Exhibit 46
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
and ask that the jury be allowed to look at it.
That's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, State's Exhibit 46, a photograph is going to be passed among you. You should do it carefully, individually, and without comment. Mr. Sheriff, you may continue.
Can you describe the neighborhood that surrounds 12412 Schoolhouse Road?
It's a very nice neighborhood, probably upper middle income type neighborhood with houses I would estimate to be in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 square feet, depending on where it is. It's very close to the Wakefield proper area that I would call, which is the original Wakefield estate area off of Falls and Noosh Road in northern Wake County. It has multiple streets, multiple cul-de-sacs, multiple residences on each street, each residence probably sitting on a quarter to a third of an acre.
And is that a neighborhood that is one where any law enforcement agency has to answer calls to on a regular basis?
The primary agency that would respond to a law enforcement call in that area will be the Raleigh Police Department.
And at some point you checked into, later on down in the investigation, you checked into whether there had been any calls to 12412 Schoolhouse Street, any of the residents surrounding that, and in fact for some distance outside that immediate neighborhood to see if there had been any calls about break-ins to any of those homes, didn't you?
I did.
And how do you do that?
I use several different sources. The main source I use is our computer-aided dispatch, an MDT, which I am issued by the Sheriff's Office. I can go on that particular our CAD or dispatch system, punch in an address, punch in a street, even specify it as low to specific agency. What will happen is it will return a query based on date range or an unlimited date range of every call for service in a particular area.
And when you say CAD, what's that?
Computer-aided dispatch.
And so you looked at the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch, which tells you what?
If somebody lived on Main Street and I could punch in Main Street, Nightdale, and it would show me all of the calls for service that, say, the Sheriff's Office or Nightdale Police Department went there, for example. If I wanted to get more specific, I could punch in 101 Main Street, and it may give me one or two extra details that may not be present in the general street location, but it will list all the types of calls for service, which would include law enforcement, fire, EMS, even animal control.
And so when you did a search on CAD, how did you do your search to see whether there had been any reports of break-ins to 12412 Schoolhouse or any of the houses on either side of it, across the street from it, from that address, or on the entire street?
Using county mapping system, I looked at street names in the area and went down and made a list of those street names, searched each street name individually. In addition, beyond what I found on those, I actually specifically entered the addresses on Schoolhouse Street to include the defendant's residence and the victim's residence, as well as the immediate adjoining residences for several houses in each direction.
And did you actually even go outside the schoolhouse, off of Schoolhouse, to a wider area?
I did. There's actually an online database called Crime Mapping that law enforcement can use. There's even some public versions that are out there. And I expanded the search to see if there had been any law enforcement agency that had responded to a call. I did a search, primary search of a half mile, and I actually extended it up to a mile and a half radius from the Schoolhouse Street address.
And within a 1.5 mile radius of the Schoolhouse Street address, had there been any reported break-ins?
In the mile and a half, there had been a reported break-in sometime in 2012 over in the Wakefield area that's covered by the sheriff's office, which is across Falls and News Road, and I believe there had been a larceny call somewhere at a shopping center that was on the outskirts of that mile and a half radius.
And how far from the Schoolhouse Road address that Mr. Perez lived in with this defendant was that single break-in call in Wakefield?
I would probably estimate it was on the outskirts of it, driving through the neighborhood. It would probably be, driving distance, it would probably be more than a mile and a half to get there in that part of the neighborhood. But it was several minutes away.
And on Schoolhouse Street itself, were there any calls to any law enforcement agency reporting a break-in and entering?
No, ma'am.
And over what period of time did you look?
Looking at the database for WakeGov, I determined that the purchase date of the house, which I believe was around September 1st, 2012, and I searched from that date to June 30th, 2013.
And why did you stop why did you start on that date and end on the date that you did?
That was the date that the most recent tax records had indicated that Ms. Madonna and Mr. Perez had moved into that residence.
Now, when you got to the residence of the defendant on Schoolhouse Street, about what time was it?
Approximately 8 p.m., I believe.
And when you got there, who did you find was at the house?
Myself, Investigator Snowden, and Investigator Weaver made our way to the front door. I believe Investigator Weaver initiated contact by knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell. The door was answered by a young female that was identified as Michelle Lopez.
And did Detective Weaver ask whether Mr. Perez's wife was home?
Yes.
And what was she told?
That she was not, that she had left the house just recently.
And were you invited in by Michelle Lopez into the house?
We stepped into the front foyer after she was going to make, I believe something was said along the lines of making a telephone call to see if it could be arranged for Ms. Madonna to come back to the residence, and we were invited into the foyer area and stood there for a couple minutes while a phone call was made to try to get Ms. Madonna to return to the residence.
And did the daughter make a phone call?
Yes.
And what was the result of that phone call?
I believe there were a couple of different telephone calls made. At that point in time, I believe contact was eventually made and Ms. Madonna was going to return to the residence.
So there was at least one call that the daughter made to the defendant that was not answered?
I'm not 100% positive.
But she made more than one call. The daughter
Yes,
made
I
more than
believe
one
so.
call to her mother.
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
And were you able to hear any conversation between the daughter and the mother?
Other than some mention about the police being present and she needed to come home, I do not remember anything specific.
At some point after the last call was made to the defendant, did the defendant return to the home?
Yes, she did.
And about what time was that?
I believe I made a notation, it was around 8:20, 8:25.
And I think I didn't finish asking you the questions earlier about who else was in the house when you got there.
I believe at the time we arrived, Michelle Lopez was there, the young daughter was there, and a babysitter was present.
And did you become aware at some point that the father of the defendant was also at the
Yes, later on in the evening, I became aware that there was an elderly gentleman in the residence.
Now, you said that between 8:20, 8:25, the defendant returned to the home. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did she, when she returned, how did she get there?
She arrived driving a white Mercedes-Benz.
And what was she wearing?
I believe white shorts and a blue shirt.
And was there, once she got out of the vehicle, was there any conversation between the defendant and you or any of the other detectives that were present?
Yes.
When the defendant first arrived, what observations of the defendant, if any, did you make?
When she first arrived, she got out of the car, walked up to the front doorstep. I was actually at my patrol vehicle. I had interviewed the babysitter that was present, walked across the front yard, and Investigator Weaver was coming out of the front door. We met the defendant approximately 5 to 10 feet outside the front door of her residence, and Investigator Weaver began to speak with her.
What was her behavior like when she first got out of the car and started walking toward the house?
Fairly normal, walking over toward the house. They're just, I would describe it as normal, getting out of the car and walking up to the front of your house.
She didn't look particularly upset or...
No, ma'am, not at all.
When you met with her along with Detective Weaver, had it already been determined who was going to do most of the talking with her?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that?
That was going to be Investigator Weaver.
And when Detective Weaver first started talking with the defendant, what conversation did the defendant have with Detective Weaver?
I believe something was mentioning about an attorney having already been telephoned.
Did that strike you as an odd thing to say?
Objection, Your Honor.
That's the thing.
Had you ever had that happen when you'd done a death notification before?
No, ma'am.
Now, what initially did Detective Weaver say to the defendant?
I believe she verified that the defendant was the spouse of the deceased person, Mr. Perez.
And at that point, what did Detective Weaver tell the defendant?
I believe a death notification was made that his body had been found and located in northern Wake County.
And were any details given about his death at that point?
No, ma'am.
And what was the defendant's reaction to being told that his body had been found?
She immediately covered her face, fell to the ground, hearing sounds of crying or sobbing along those lines. She was on the ground for a short period of time, and she looked up and made a statement to us.
You've, since that night when the death notification was given, you have had occasion to see the defendant crying, haven't you?
Yes, ma'am.
You've seen her at least twice on videotapes or on CD discs, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you, in thinking back after having seen her crying on those recorded media, did that affect how you viewed her reaction on the night that she was informed of her husband's death?
Objection, Your Honor.
Stay.
When the defendant fell to the ground and covered her face and appeared to be crying, did you ever see any tears?
No, sir.
And when you'd seen her cry on other occasions that have been recorded that you've looked at since then, did she have tears?
I have seen some videos with tears, yes.
Did the crying that you saw on the videotapes appear to be the same kind of crying you saw the night that she was
Objection, Your Honor.
informed?
Oh,
No, ma'am.
At any point that evening, did the defendant ask you or any other detective who was present what had happened to her husband?
No, ma'am.
Did she ask where he'd been found?
No, ma'am.
Did she ask if he had been murdered?
No, ma'am.
She did ask something about him, didn't she?
Yes, ma'am.
What did she ask?
She asked if he had hurt himself.
And at some point, did Detective Weaver tell the defendant anything additional about Mr. Perez's death?
I just believe she'd been the victim of a violent crime, and I believe they moved to the steps, sat down, and began a short conversation.
Did you see a big difference in her in the defendant's behavior between when she initially sat down on the ground and covered her eyes and or covered her face and appeared to cry, and when she was sitting on the step with Detective Weaver?
Yes.
How did that change occur, and
I would describe it as something that would be returning to relative normal behavior, not as upset.
did you ever see her cry?
No, ma'am.
No tears?
No tears.
And when the defendant sat on the step with Detective Weaver, at that point, what was the conversation?
I believe Detective Weaver was having a conversation about the last known whereabouts, what she knew about her husband, where he may have been last night, general questions along those lines, information gathering.
And at that point, had you a question in your mind as to whether this defendant might be involved in the death of her husband?
Yes, ma'am.
And why did you have that question in your mind at that point?
The totality of the behavior I'd observed to that point was not to my satisfaction and did rise suspicion as to there may be other questions that need to be asked here.
And so Detective Weaver asked some more questions, didn't she?
Yes.
And you said one of the things that she inquired about of the defendant was when she had last seen her husband?
Yes.
Tell us about that part of the conversation.
I believe the general question along the when's the last time you saw your husband, where was he going, and the defendant made a statement that something to the effect that he had left the house with a packed suitcase going to visit one of his sponsors with the plans to relocate to Florida.
And what other statements, if any, did the defendant make?
I believe she mentioned that he had been verbally abusive recently and started drinking.
And did she mention any other problems?
I would have to refer. Not in my notes that I see.
Now, at some point after the defendant told Detective Weaver that there had been problems in the marriage, did Detective Weaver or some other law enforcement officer ask the defendant if it was okay if they looked in the house?
Yes.
And what was the point of that at that time?
At that point in time, you would want to make sure that there is, if for general investigative means, that if there is a crime scene there, that it can be identified, it can be locked down for further investigation. You may want to determine that if some additional event had happened, that it may not have happened inside that particular residence. Essentially, it's a kind of finding but elimination process to try to determine and verify that there was not an additional crime scene inside the residence.
And what was the defendant's reply to Detective Weaver's request to be able to look in the house?
We were not granted consent. We would need to get a search warrant.
So did you do that?
Yes, we did.
And when did you get the search warrant returned to the house?
I believe it was around 3 a.m. was when it was actually physically on scene.
And during the period of time from around 8:30 in the evening until 3 a.m. on the following day, was anybody allowed in or out of the house?
No, ma'am.
Was anybody allowed to take anything in or out of the house?
No, ma'am.
And when the search warrant was returned, how was it executed?
It was read to the daughter, Michelle Lopez.
And at that point, was the defendant present?
No, she was not.
So who participated in the search of the residence?
Agents with City County Bureau of Identification, Investigator Barefoot with the Sheriff's Office, myself, I believe Chief Johnson may have been present, but I'm not sure if he was inside the house.
And where was the search begun?
We began in the garage area primarily.
Now, before you and the other investigators and CCBI began to search, were photographs taken?
Yes, they were.
And after photographs were taken, is that when the actual search began?
Yes.
Now, why do you wait until photos are taken?
Everything needs to be documented in its exact condition as we find it. We don't want anything to be disturbed. We want everything to be able to be photographed to accurately represent the scene as we found it.
And when you did finally begin to search the residence based on that search warrant, what did you specifically do?
Once it was on scene, it's our primary practice that if the City County Bureau of Identification are going to be involved, that we let them handle the items that they need to detect, process, whatever to begin with. We give them essentially the first opportunity to view everything inside the residence, document those things, determine which things may have a forensic value, and collect those things and identify them. We essentially stand by as assisting them until we're cleared to do further investigation.
And when the garage area was searched, the area outside of the vehicle, what was one of the primary areas that was looked at?
The Jeep was focused on. There was a green Jeep parked inside the garage. It was focused on, as well as the area of a garbage can that was located along the interior wall of the garage.
And did you actually search what was in the garbage can, or did CCBI do that?
CCBI did that.
And were you present watching as everything that was taken out of the garbage can was looked at?
Yes, I was.
CCBI retained some of the items that were found in the garbage, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You retained others.
Yes, ma'am.
Why the difference? Why the split between you keeping some stuff and CCBI keeping some stuff?
When executing a search warrant, you may find all different types of evidence, and you're searching for evidence just beyond that, which may be forensic evidence. Because the City County Bureau of Identification specializes in the forensic side of things, they will collect forensic evidence they deem that they want to have for additional testing. Other items may just be law enforcement necessary, such as identifying documents within inside the residence. Other items that may not have forensic value but have investigative value, we would then collect later on, in essentially two different collections.
I've placed in front of you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 48. Can you look at that and then open it up and look inside and tell me if you recognize it, and if so, what it is?
Yes, State's Exhibit 48 is a bag that which labeled with prescription medications that I collected from the garage trash can on the morning of June 17th, 2013.
And you know that from?
It has an identification card which I affixed to it. My signature is on it, and my signature is also on some of the original sealings.
If you'll open it.
Yes, ma'am, I recognize this.
Could you take the contents out, please? While you were at the house doing the search, you collected these items, is that correct, that are in State's Exhibit 48?
Yes, ma'am.
And they came from where?
The garage garbage can.
Were they in a garbage bag or just thrown loosely into the garbage?
They had been discarded in a garbage bag, I believe a separate garbage bag that was inside the garbage can.
And when you saw all those things while you were at the house, was there some reason that you collected all of those items that were in State's Exhibit 48?
Typically, whenever we are involved in a death investigation, if somebody has prescribed medications, we will try to collect all of those that we can. In this case, based on the location that we observed them to be, which was discarded, it was very interesting to us. We want to make sure we collect all of them to make sure all the medications were accounted for in case they needed to be tested, observed, counted, or anything at any later time.
And all of the items, the bottles and boxes that you've taken out of State's Exhibit 48 are what?
It's a variety of medications, but all of them are prescribed to Jose Perez.
Now, you identified other things that were observed in the garbage during the course of that search, is that correct?
I did.
And you gonna introduce these into evidence?
I will.
Are you moving now?
I can. I was going to wait until all of them were in.
We're gonna commingle them
Your Honor, at this time, the State would offer into evidence State's Exhibit 48.
and its contents. Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Mr. Loud.
If you could look at State's Exhibit 51 and tell us whether you recognize what that is and how you recognize it.
State's Exhibit 51 is a brown paper bag that contains what I have listed as miscellaneous personal items believed to belong to Jose Perez.
And if you could open that, and while you're doing that, tell us how you recognize that that's what it is.
I recognize it because some of the tape has my initials on it, as well as any time we put something into evidence, we put an evidence placard card on it and sign our name on it the time we turn it over to the evidence custodian. Yes, I recognize these.
May I approach?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the items that were in the bag that's marked as State's Exhibit 51A, where did they come from?
They had been discarded into trash bags into the garage trash can.
And was there some reason why you collected these items rather than having CCBI collect them?
They did not have any potential forensic value at that point in time, and CCBI had deemed that they did not need to test them for any reason, so they seemed to be the personal effects of the victim, so we collected them.
And I'm marking one of the items from the bag that is 51 as State's Exhibit 51A, one of them as 51B, and ask you if you recognize what those are.
Yes, these were among the discarded items that were found in the trash can.
What is 51A
This appears to be an 8x10 photograph of the defendant.
and 51B?
This is a 4x6 photograph of the deceased and friends or family.
Your Honor, the state offers into evidence 51A and 51B
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion allowed.
and ask that the jury be allowed to view them.
Yes, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pass among you State's Exhibit 51A and 51B. You should view them carefully individually and without comment. You may continue.
You already have in front of you what have been marked as State's Exhibits 39, 40, and 41. Put your gloves on. As well as 44 and 45. Do you recognize these items?
I do.
And where did they come from?
They were collected as part of the investigation. The two phones, I believe, were collected from the individuals themselves, and the Garmin GPS was removed from the trash can in the garage.
And when you talk about the Garmin GPS, that's State's Exhibit what?
That's State's Exhibit 41.
And you collected that out of the trash in the trash can at in the garage at 12412 Schoolhouse Street.
I did.
And the two phones, State's Exhibit 39 and 40, how were those collected?
I believe the iPhone from Michelle Lopez was collected during an interview at the sheriff's office, and the Motorola phone belonging to the defendant was collected at some point in time when she was at the Public Safety Center.
And what are State's Exhibits 44 and 45?
These are DVDs of information related to the electronic investigation of this case.
And at some point down the road, did you use the information from States 44 or 45 to do any further investigation?
I did.
At some point, went inside the house, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you went inside the house, you were doing additional searching.
Yes.
And I need a sticker. And not just one area of the house was searched, is that correct?
The entire house, yes, was searched.
The upstairs and the downstairs,
Yes, ma'am.
all the rooms? You went into all the rooms?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've got in front of you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 52. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
State's Exhibit 52 is a collection of miscellaneous papers and documents that I collected from the office area of the residents at 12412 Schoolhouse Street. It was collected
And-
the morning of the 17th.
Okay. And could you open State's Exhibit number 52?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Do you recognize the items inside State's Exhibit number 52?
Yes, ma'am. This is the collection of documents I retrieved from the office.
If I could approach.
Yes, ma'am.
You collected a lot of stuff, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
And some of it was just little scraps of paper.
Yes, ma'am.
And didn't have anything of interest, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
There were other things that you did think were of interest, given the situation as you knew it at that point.
Yes, ma'am.
What items in State's Exhibit number 52 did you find to be of interest?
We found various documents relating to Mr. Perez's Veterans Affairs issues such as disability and things, some financial records, tax records, miscellaneous financial documents.
One of the items inside State's Exhibit 52 I've marked as 52A. What is that?
This is a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Winston-Salem, North Carolina office, to Mr. Perez.
And what does it say?
Dear Sir or Madam, Department of Veteran Affairs records show Jose M. Perez Henriquez has disabilities which are considered to be, by the VA, to be 100% and has been deemed totally and permanently disabling. Sincerely, K. Fonzeltler, Veterans Service Center Manager.
And the name Jose Perez Enriquez, are you familiar with Hispanic names?
Somewhat, yes.
And are you familiar with the fact that people have a last name, but they put it on the end as a hyphen their mother's name?
Yes, ma'am.
And so Jose Perez Enriquez would have been Jose Perez as we know him, saying that his mother's name was Enriquez.
Yes, ma'am, to my knowledge, yes, ma'am.
What is State's Exhibit 52B?
This is another Department of Veterans Affairs letter mailed to Mr. Perez.
And what does it say?
This letter is a summary of benefits you currently receive from the Department of Veterans Affairs. We are providing this letter to disabled veterans to use in applying for benefits such as housing, entitlements, free or reduced state park annual memberships, state or local property or vehicle tax relief, civil service preference, or any other program or entitlement in which verification of VA benefits is required. Please safeguard this important document. This letter replaces VA Form 20-5455 and is considered an official record of your VA entitlement. America is grateful to you for your service. Our records contain the following information. Personal claim information. Your VA claim number is 27026-985. You are the veteran. Military information. Your characters of discharge and service dates include Army, Honorable, 15 August 1968 to 14 August 1970. You may have additional periods of service not listed above. VA benefits information. Service-connected disability, yes. Your combined service-connected evaluation is 100%. The effective date of the last change to your current award was 17 January 2012. Your current monthly award amount is $4,431. Are you considered to be totally and permanently disabled due to your service-connected disabilities? Yes. Are you receiving special monthly compensation? Yes. Have you received a specialty adapted housing and/or special home adaptation grant? Yes. You should contact your state or local office of Veterans Affairs for information on any tax, license, or fee-related benefits for which you may be eligible. State offices of Veteran Affairs are available at http://worldwideweb.va.gov.statedva.htm.
And so does it say on there his monthly amount that he's getting from VA?
It does.
And that was?
$4,431.
And State's Exhibit 52C.
This looks as if it's part of his medical records.
And what does that indicate? Is it his medical or his military?
Military records, excuse me. It indicates that he was in service in the Army. He had reached the grade of SP4 or E4, and it has some of his service dates and entry dates. He had an honorable discharge under item number 13.
And what is 52D?
52D is a letter from the Department of Defense Human Resources Activity, Defense Manpower Data Center. It is addressed to Jose M. Perez at 3020 Queensland Road in Raleigh.
And what is 52E?
52E is from the Social Security Administration, Retirement, Survivors, and Disability Insurance, Important Information, addressed to Jose M. Perez Enriquez, Kingsway Court, Wake Forest.
And 52F?
This is another letter from the Department of Veteran Affairs to Mr. Jose Perez Enriquez. The official records of the Department of Veteran Affairs verify that Jose M. Perez Enriquez receives $4,431 per month for a service-connected disability and is rated at 100%.
What is 52G?
This appears to be a payment ledger for the address at 3020 Queensland Road in Raleigh.
And what does it indicate?
Let's be household payments to the actual household.
For the rent?
It appears to be so, yes.
And who was the payment to?
House Properties, LLC.
And who does it indicate was making the payments?
The tenant ledger lists Jose Perez at the top.
And what was the period of time during which those payments were made according to this exhibit?
These records indicate January 1, 2010 to February 3rd, 2012.
What is State's Exhibit 52H?
52H is a letter from the Department of Veteran Affairs to Michelle R. Lopez at 12,412 Schoolhouse Street in Raleigh.
And what does it indicate?
You have been awarded educational allowance as follows. Monthly rate, $987. Effective date, January 7, 2013. Ending date, May 7, 2013. At the end of the last period shown above, your remaining entitlement will be 39 months and 17 days if used prior to January 17, 2020.
And what is 52I?
This is a form for the Department of Veteran Affairs, request for approval of school attendance with the name of the veteran as Jose M. Perez Enriquez and the first name of the student as Rachel A. Lopez.
And what does it indicate?
The address of 3020 Queensland Road, that she's attending Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina with a course of social work with an official beginning date of the term of August 2nd, 2010 and expected date of graduation May 28, 2014.
And what kind of document is that?
It appears to be one that would be sent to verification for Veteran Affairs or application for to Veteran Affairs for assistance.
Your Honor, the state offers into evidence 52A through I
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion allowed.
and ask that those items be published to the jury.
Yes, ma'am, you want to pass them?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, State's Exhibits 52A through I are going to be passed among you. You should view them carefully, individually, and without comment. Mr. Chair, if we switch rows.
As part of your continuing search of the inside of the residence, did you, where else did you look other than at the desk area?
We looked throughout the entire residence. In the garage area, we searched bedrooms, we searched common areas, bedrooms, pretty much the entire residence, the curtilage of the residence, exterior areas of the residence.
Did you find any alcohol bottles?
Did not.
Find any condom wrappers?
I did not.
Find any pills other than pills that were legally prescribed for Jose Perez?
No, ma'am.
You have in front of you what I have marked as State's Exhibit 54,
I believe it's 53.
53. What is that?
This is a brown bag containing what I have listed as rings and jewelry in brown bag. It has my identification card for evidence on it, my handwriting, and appears that my initials are on the seal.
And what is State's Exhibit 53?
It is listed as rings and jewelry.
Can you open it? You recognize the items inside State's Exhibit 53?
Yes, two smaller brown bags with items inside.
You'll open those. And what was in the smaller bags inside of State's Exhibit 53 bag?
3 pieces of jewelry.
And can you describe the piece of jewelry for us?
One appears to be some sort of bracelet with silver in color with stones, and the other 2 items appear to be what I would describe as an engagement ring and possible wedding band.
Where was the engagement ring and wedding band found?
They were found in the garage garbage can.
And were they inside a bag?
They were not.
How were they located, or where were they located?
They appeared to be loosely discarded or dropped into the trash can.
And the second piece of jewelry that you have in front of us from State's Exhibit 53, where did that come from?
I believe that was also located, dropped into the trash can.
Now, you said that the documents that you just testified to were found in the office area of the house. Is that correct?
Correct.
And could you tell from items that were around on the desk or desks who the primary user of that office area appeared to be?
Not that I recall, and there's family documents sitting there to one side or the other.
Were there jewelry-making items on the desk?
Yes.
And were you aware, or did you become aware at some point that the defendant makes or made jewelry?
Yes, sir.
Was there anything on the desk that would have indicated to you that Jose Lopez actually used that desk?
I can't recall anything specific.
And was there a computer there?
There was.
What kind of a computer was it, if you recall?
I am not sure. I believe it may have been an Acer, but I'm not positive without seeing it.
It was a desktop computer?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time I'd offer into evidence State's Exhibit 53, the bag and its contents.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion allowed.
And you have in front of you what I've marked as State's Exhibit 54. What is that?
State's Exhibit 54 is an Acer computer. Has my identifying card where I collected it and passed it along to our evidence custodian. My signature is on the card.
Who's your evidence custodian?
Sergeant Sternberg.
And did you seize that computer for any particular reason?
Yes, it's becoming an increasing need in law enforcement to seize electronic devices. We've become such an electronic and information society that a lot of times there's information stored on anything that's an electronic device, such as a home computer, such as cell phones, any of that nature, and the investigation of those can help you determine various facts and clues that may be successful and help you in an investigation.
And so when after you seized State's Exhibit 54 and turned it in to your evidence custodian, did you request that anything further be done with it?
Yes, I believe a search warrant was completed and asked that a forensic examination be completed by the City County Bureau of Identification.
And who within the CCBI is the person who does forensic examinations of computers?
I believe that is Mike Brookerson at this time.
Your Honor, the state offers into evidence State's Exhibit 54.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion allowed.
Now, back when I was asking you about the CAD, checking out the CAD, the computer-assisted, I'm sorry.
Computer-aided dispatch.
Computer-aided dispatch. You said that there had been no break-ins reported within between a mile and a half of the defendant's home since the period of time that she had lived there.
Yes, I did 3 different searches at a half mile, full mile, and a mile and a half.
Okay. And would that have included any calls that might have, if there had been any, to the home of the defendant for reported domestic violence or some kind of altercation that might have occurred at the house?
Yes, the crime mapping system that you can use from the accessing that type of database will map out any call for service that may have been investigated.
And so there was no call for service at all of any sort to that house, is that correct?
I believe at some point in time in 2012 there would have been a trespass call initiated from that residence, but it was handled very quickly by a Raleigh officer, and I believe they had put CAD comments in and cleared the call very quickly.
Now, how long were you and CCBI at the residence on the 17th of July doing the search that you did both in the garage and inside the house?
CCBI arrived prior to the search warrant being on scene, and we stood by waiting for the search warrant. Once it was there, we initiated the search at the same time, right after the reading of the search warrant, which was approximately 3 o'clock in the morning. I believe I cleared that morning close to 7 o'clock a.m.
And when you, after you got off that day, did you do anything further to aid in the investigation of this case?
I did.
What else did you do?
I've interviewed several individuals that came up as names in the case. I've looked at some of the electronic records that were brought into the case, as well as done additional duties as assigned by Investigator Weaver or anyone else in the Sheriff's Office to basically assist in furthering all of those tasks that must need to be done at the conclusion of to successfully complete an investigation.
And by the 18th of June 2013, you had some additional evidence, is that correct?
Yes, information was coming in.
And based on the additional evidence that you received, either during the course of or after the search at the house was done, did you travel to any stores nearby the 12412 Schoolhouse Road address?
Some information had been developed and was passed along to me that the defendant and the victim in this case may have visited what was known as a dollar store, and I just did a basic internet search for anything known as the dollar store. The only location I found with that exact name was along Wake Forest. That was not a huge distance from the defendant's residence or the scene of where Mr. Perez was located.
And why did you go there?
Just to determine if we could put the timeline together. One of the things that we like to do as investigators is essentially a reconstruction. We want to find out as much information as possible from prior to any incident happening until the conclusion of it happening, and then beyond, to determine how everything will fall into a timeline.
And were you able to find any information about the defendant having been at that dollar store on Wake Forest Road?
The actual dollar store that was off of Capitol Boulevard near Wake Forest, there was no video footage. In addition, I went to the Dollar General, which is located in Wake Forest proper, viewed video, and did not see any indication that they had been to that store.
And from what you know of the area and what you found online, were there any other dollar stores within 2 or 3 miles of the home of the defendant?
There is a dollar store now close to, in the Falls River subdivision, that used to be a drugstore. I'm not sure when it changed over, but at that time it was not part of my search because we were focusing on the Wake Forest area based on the information that had come across.
Did you also return to the Queensland Road address for any reason?
I did, just wanted to make sure everything was okay at that residence. It has been within my training and experience. There have been times when people may have moved out of a residence but maintained the key while the residence is being sold, moved, or anything along those lines, and we wanted to verify that nothing had occurred at that residence.
And were you able to get inside the residence on Queensland Road?
Yes, I made contact with the realty company, and one of their agents met me at the scene, and we went inside and observed the residence.
And what did you see inside?
Everything appeared to be exactly normal.
You didn't see any blood or any sign of struggle or anything like that?
No, ma'am.
Did you make a request of the jail that had anything to do with the defendant's phone calls, visits, or mail?
It is a common practice for major cases that the Sheriff's Office is investigating to request that any visitations be videoed and maintained on a server for later view. All telephone calls that are made from the Wake County Detention Center are recorded on an external server and are subject to review at any time.
And was that in fact done?
Yes.
At some point after you did those things, did you also interview John Chadwick Richardson?
I did.
And when did you do that?
Mr. Richardson's interview was on June 26, 2013,
And where did you interview him?
the Public Safety Center.
What did he tell you?
He told me during the course of an interview that he had been a therapist for the defendant, and during the course of therapy sessions, they had come in, discovered that they had music in common, and that as a result of that, some conversation had come about where he had been asked to play in a band because he's also a musician. He mentioned at that point in time that some conversation took place about him not being able to be her therapist if they were going to have a relationship other than that, music or otherwise. During the course of our interview, he indicated that it had taken a little bit of a turn and was starting to have a flirtatious side to it, and that there could have been the possibility of a dating relationship at some point.
That's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our morning recess at this point. During this time, it is your duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. Do not talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. It's your further duty not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you, to say anything in your presence about this case. Don't do any individual research, investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay away from your smartphones. And do not form or express an opinion about any issue in this trial during this time. With that, while everyone else will remain seated, I'm going to excuse the 13 of you and ask that you return and assemble in the jury room at 10 minutes to the hour of 12. We'll go by that clock. That you're excused.